The National Assembly has approved President Bola Tinubu's request to borrow 1.15 trillion naira from the domestic debt market to help fund the 2025 budget deficit. The approval was granted on Wednesday, November 12, 2025, for both the Senate and House of Representatives consider the report from the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debt. The budget for 2025, you'll recall, was increased, resulting in a deficit of 14.1 trillion naira. And since 12.95 trillion naira had already been approved for borrowing, there was a remaining funding gap of about 1.15 trillion naira. And so President Bola Tinubu requested this additional loan on November 4, 2025 to cover this gap and support the implementation of government programs and projects in the 2025 fiscal year. Other recent loan approvals, just to remind you, you'd remember the Senate had approved an external borrowing plan exceeding $21 billion for the 2025-2026 fiscal cycle back in July 2025. A motion was also passed for the Senate Committee on Appropriations to enhance oversight to ensure responsible use of funds. Welcome to Homo Politicus. This is Enterprise Television. Kingsley Bass is my name. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the broadcast. I'm joined to talk about this particular matter, look at these figures, and indeed I respond to this big question on Homo Politicus today. As the president, is the Tinubu administration borrowing too much? Have they crossed a reasonable threshold with this borrowing? Joining me to discuss this is Nelson Ekujimi. He joins me virtually today. Many thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Appreciate that. I'd like to start on this note, this very important question. For many Nigerians, when they hear the approval of the request to borrow more, it's disturbing for them. The country is generating a lot. Government is going to be collecting more taxes than the rest. So why then is government borrowing? From your point of view, has the Tinubu administration crossed a reasonable threshold with its borrowing, or are these loans justified considering Nigeria's current fiscal challenges?
Well, thank you very much. I think it is important for us in the media recognizing our responsibility to inform and educate, to let people know the essence of borrowing. You can borrow to finance projects. You can borrow to redirect the economy. You can borrow to tie to specific, responsibilities of government. In this case, we are talking about a budget deficit that needs to be plugged. And this borrowing, if you look at the terms, it's about local borrowing. And as a student of economics, I know that you don't borrow a loan because you want to finance projects or programs. You can borrow as a means of taming corruption, as a means of taming inflation, inflation in the literary terms means when there's too much money chasing too few goods. So this borrowing, it's unfortunate. We live in a society today whereby when people read the headlines, they don't take the time to interrogate the facts. They just run with their emotions. I remember vividly well under late former President Muhammadu Buhari, when the government went up borrowing. And a lot of us were aghast by the level of ignorance displayed by Nigerians. Why do I say ignorance? The government as at that time, or the world as at that time, was reeling from the effect of COVID-19 that had closed down the global economy. And even this is 2025, the whole world is still reeling with the shock of COVID-19. So when the government cannot generate revenue from taxes, from revenues, from tolls, from tariffs, from levies, because people are not working, where do you expect government to get funds to execute projects that will impact on the lives of the people? There's no way in the world where government just sit down in government office and start printing money. United States of America, the biggest democracy in the world today, and even China, are the greatest debtors. They continue to borrow to finance projects that will change the life of humanity for good. So when you hear about borrowing, it is for you to interrogate the facts. This borrowing, what is it meant for? Is there a need for this borrowing? There is a budget of 2025 that there's a deficit of about 1.15 trillion naira. And this deficit could have arisen as a result of the shortfall in revenue from oil, even though we admit that the government has told us that they have even surpassed the revenue from non-oil exports.
Yeah.
But, you know, the budget is based on both oil and non-oil. So when issues like this come up, it is not for you to just run. You want to seek populism. You want to be seen as a social, a critic, an activist. My level of activism, or my own understanding of activism, is to identify social problems dispassionately without bias and provide solutions. My activism is not about running down government, running down people. It is about abuse, it's about critique, and not providing solutions. So when you say government should not borrow, can anybody tell us where they expect the government to get funds to fill in the gap with regards to the budget deficit?
Nelson Ekujimi, some Nigerians have, suggested, recommended to government to maybe close corruption gaps, those leakages of the system, cut down on government spending. There's ways to raise funds as well. Some persons have said too that, we know that the presidency has said some of the funds saved from the removal of fuel subsidy, for example, has gone to the subnationals, and that state governments should do more. But some Nigerians feel that, if you do some of these things, block leakages in corruption. For example, just this week, the National Assembly spoke, ferociously about the 210 trillion naira that wasn't necessarily counted for by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, and they feel like, these are some of the funds that, if well accounted for, could help the country and reduce dependence on borrowing.
Well, when we are talking about borrowing by the federal government, I hope we recognize that in Nigeria today, we operate 3 tiers of government. We operate the federal government, we have the state government, and we have the local government. As we speak, states are liquidating their debts. And if states are liquidating their debts, and also where the need arises, they are asking for fresh loans because of the fact that they have the confidence that they have somewhere that they will recoup and repay back those loans. It is government as an institution is not a single room where you feel there's corruption in one place and you want to close the door. No, it doesn't work that way. It's not that elementary. When you talk about government expenses, you need to understand how government functions. Government is like an octopus. It has so many heads and so many legs. Government is attending to education, health, security, welfare, foreign affairs, internal affairs, and you can name it. So when people talk about government, reducing cost of governance, you need to ask, in which area do you feel that government is embarking on wastages? Today, we are talking about a government that has removed fuel subsidy. And when they talk about savings, it's not about the money being saved. It's that a money that will have been budgeted for it is plowed to other areas of human engagement to deliver the dividends of democracy to the people. So we must understand the reason for the borrowing. And we must not run like the mob who do not ask questions. This borrowing, what is it going to be used for? For example, when the government says they are going to borrow locally, like the National Assembly has approved the 1.15 trillion naira for the present administration, it's going to be local borrowing. What is that going to do? The government is saying, if you have money, we are going to mop it up. And in that way, the level of inflation will be combated. If the government today, I have maybe 50 million naira in my account, and government is throwing an offer of selling bonds of a 3-year tenure, and there's interest on it. Definitely, I will be tempted to part of that money that I would have used for other things. I will invest it in bonds or treasury bills by the CBN. And what are treasury bills means to do? They are means of mopping up funds from outside government circle to carry out government activities. So people must be educated to understand how government runs. Excuse me.
Some
government does not run the way you think you are running your family, your home, where you can say one child should go to school because you don't have money now, the other one should stay at home until the one that you have sent to school completes his education. Government don't run that way. Government tackles all problems at all times, and even those that have not occurred, government is preparing for emergencies.
All right. Some more Nigerians, in criticizing this borrowings, say that Nigeria's debt servicing costs already consumed a large portion of government's revenue. So, from your standpoint, I mean, you've spoken a lot about the justification for this borrowings, but this continued borrowing, Nelson Ekujimi, is sustainable under these conditions, the conditions where debt servicing is already consuming a lot from government's revenue.
When this administration came in, you remember vividly well that Mr. President addressed the nation after 1 year, and he told the nation that the government in the last 1 year was servicing its debts with 97% of revenue. I'm sure we all have that fact on our hands or before us. And 2 years after, the same government has told you and I, that the level of debt servicing has reduced to 67%, which tells you clearly that the government is plugging all the loopholes. That is why today we no longer hear of states being unable to pay salaries. We are no longer hearing of states being unable to pay pensions and emoluments of retirees. So
even though some states are still yet to pay in some states.
Are yet to pay what?
Even though some states, yet to offload backlogs of, such arrears.
Well, except if you can come out with that specifics, because I'm aware that the Nigerian Labour Congress gave a marching order to its affiliates, state affiliates, that any government that is unable to pay 70,000 naira minimum wage, that they should go on protest. And as we speak, I'm unaware of one state that has not even gone beyond that benchmark. As we speak, Imo State came out publicly, you are now aware that she's paying 104,000 naira. Lagos State, where we are residents, is paying 85,000 naira. Edo State is paying between 75 and 80,000 naira minimum wage. These were things that were unthinkable in the past. You remember, let me also educate and inform us. In 2018, late former President Muhammadu Buhari signed the national minimum wage, increased it from 18,000 naira to 30,000 naira in 2018. As at 2023, when late President Muhammadu Buhari was leaving office, over half of the states could not pay 30,000 naira because of the hemorrhaging of the economy by fuel subsidy and the forex scam. But today, in 2025, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came into office in 2023, and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu increased the minimum wage from 30,000 naira to 70,000 naira. And we have seen the level of competition between the states. trying to outdo one another in paying even be above the minimum wage. So if you have the fact of a state that is yet to meet its obligations with regards to the national minimum wage, because I know very well that signing the national minimum wage involves a lot of consultation, a lot of debate, a lot of dialogue. Under former President Muhammadu Buhari, you remember, the state governors forum, they refused to sign because they said they could not pay. They will not be able to pay. And they were unable to pay. But in this era, in this dispensation, the states were willing to sign, freely. And today, I'm unaware, except maybe you. If you can point to one state, then I will interrogate it. But as we speak, the facts on the ground is that almost all the states in Nigeria today are paying, if not the minimum wage, are paying far above it, whether either marginally or otherwise.
All right, that conversation, of course, around the payment of minimum wage, states defaulting, and in some cases, workers complaining, that conversation would be for some other time. Time won't permit that we talk about that today. But again, in talking about that, I was specifically reacting to your point, I think, when you mentioned pensions and gratuities. But that said, let's refocus on these borrowings by the Tinubu administration and the plenty questions that Nigerians continue to pose about constant borrowing. Now, if you say that borrowing is necessary, especially in this case, to fund the budget deficit, what mechanisms then should be in place to guarantee transparency, to guarantee accountability, and measurable results from these loans? Talking about the implementation of project in the budget.
Well, I don't know where you got your adjective of constant borrowing from, because I don't remember this government borrowing in the last 2 months or in the last 3 months. I can't remember that. So if you are talking about accountability and transparency with regards to the borrowed funds, it is for us as a people to challenge our lawmakers. The lawmakers have oversight functions. And even at the level of civil society, we also have the role of observing and monitoring government pronouncements and programs and projects. So when you are talking about accountability on what this borrowing are meant to actualize, it is for us to interrogate the facts. Now we are interrogating the facts about this borrowing. We are not running with the populism mentality that government is way, because anybody that just wakes up and speaks from both sides of the mouth to criticize and attack government, immediately the media label that type of person an activist, an advocate for the people, an advocate for the people in ignorance, an advocate for the people that cannot guide the people right. That look, this is how life is supposed to be lived. It is not about your emotions. Society is not governed by emotions, because everybody has emotions. And if we are going to run by our emotions, then there will be crisis. It will be a state of anarchy. But society is governed by facts, figures, and data. So in this case, there's a figure. Go and look at the 2025 budget. Is there a deficit to be filled? And if there's a deficit to be filled, how do we procure the resources to block or to cushion that deficit? So if the government has gone borrowing to cushion that deficit, any person that disagrees should be able to avail us the route to take. And if you are talking about accountability and transparency with regards to the borrowing, that is the responsibility of every one of us. Because the government exists for us, and it behoves on us as people at every point in time to ask questions just like we are doing. We are interrogating the borrowing. But for me to now come here and say, why should they borrow? I've just told you, governments, individuals, groups, organizations, and institutions continue to borrow from time immemorial. And I've also made it clear to you that countries, advanced economies like US and China, and you can name it, are the biggest debtor today.
Some have, they continue to. Yeah, I'm just going to talk about the United States being, one of the biggest debtors in the world. Some have said,
it's not one.
Yes. You can say the biggest debtor. in the world. But somehow,
put it in clear perspective. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that's there for the fact. But some have said, for example, when it concerns Nigeria's external borrowing, that the United States of America borrows in United States dollars. We don't, spend in United States dollars, and so when we borrow, especially not in the last one, the one we're discussing from the domestic debt market, but borrowing externally, that becomes there's so much burden on the Nigerian economy because we're paying back in dollars, and that is such a burden on naira, on the naira. How do you respond to those who say that we shouldn't compare borrowings by Nigeria, external borrowing by Nigeria, and the big economy like the United States?
Well, when we borrow, like we have both agreed, and I hope our viewers will also agree, but they have a right to disagree if they want to. What we have both agreed is that borrowing is an essential part of human existence. There's no doubt about that. You borrow to execute projects. Where you quarrel with borrowing, if the borrowing is not for capital projects, if the borrowing is not for things that will impact on lives, or if the borrowing is for things that has to do with immediate benefits. But if a borrowing is about putting in place structures, putting in place infrastructures that will outlive us, I'm home and dry with it. Today, as I speak to you, I'm a beneficiary of persons who have borrowed in the past, and I'm reaping the benefit today. Because if those projects that were put in place with the borrowing that was incurred then, if I have to, embark on that journey today, only God knows if I will ever be able to come out of it. I won't even be able, to execute it. But what we are saying is that even when we borrow from outside our shores, such borrowing are tied to specific projects. And those projects, in view of the lender, are stated explicitly. So it's not like a government is borrowing and the money or the fund that is borrowed goes into the pocket of Mr. President or the Senate President. Absolutely not. These are borrowing that passes through processes. And even before the borrowing is approved, there are lots of processes and procedures that have to be passed through. So it is not like me waking up in the morning and approaching the thrift collector that lives behind my house because I have a car that I want to borrow money. No, these are borrowing from international institutions. And there are parameters that have to be crossed. There are hurdles that you have to, jump over before you can assess those borrowing. Or else you continue to make those moves, and at the end of the day, the borrowing will not see the light of day. We have seen even countries in Africa that have attempted to borrow, and they were not allowed to assess those funds because they faltered in fulfilling their part of the bargain to previous loans. So borrowing in this modern age and times is one that has become an issue of public scrutiny. So we should not allow anybody to play on our emotions that, they are borrowing too much. Borrowing for what? How much have they borrowed? What is the borrowing for? Those are the basic questions I will ask if anybody brings such issues to me. I will not run with you if you can play on my intelligence.
All right. Let's before we close, look at what data says. Nigeria's total public debt is at June 2025, and this is according to the Debt Management Office. It's estimated at about 152.39 trillion dollars. That's some $99 billion. In naira, 152 trillion naira, and that's marking a significant increase driven by factors like exchange rates, you can say, the adjustment and new borrowings, fresh borrowings by the government. The total public debt is put at, as mentioned again, 152 trillion naira. External debt covers 70 of that amount, 70 trillion naira of that amount, and domestic debt, which has now been further boosted by this approval, if disbursed, would be boosted. But as of July 2025, it stands at 70.76 trillion naira. Now, that is where some Nigerians have shared major concerns. And in closing, are you worried, though, that even though it is justified that this administration has borrowed these fresh approvals? By the way, you did mention that the use of the term constant borrowing is debatable. But again, we saw a few months back the approval for external borrowing by the National Assembly. But that said, looking at this data and the continuous rise, the continuous increase in the debt profile of the country, are you worried? Do you think that we should begin to look at ways to fund government projects so that this debt profile can maybe for once be stabilized and reduced?
The fact of the matter is that government is a continuum. Any government that comes in after a previous government inherits the assets and liabilities of its predecessor. So looking at Nigeria's borrowing today, you have read out the figures. I'm sure those who are obliging us those loans, before a lender, let us even take it to the micro level, like you and I, if you approach a bank to take a loan, definitely you know that the bank will first of all go and x-ray your assets. The bank will x-ray your history. A part of the requirements in your form is that you'll be asked that are you indebted to a bank? Are you owing any bank in the past? So these are questions that you and I know very well that are the processes you pass through. So it is not for us to say because we have a debt burden of maybe $30 trillion or what have you, that we should now use that as a smokescreen, to believe that borrowing is a bad venture. No, absolutely not. Like I asked earlier on, what is the
I suppose technical glitch there. We've been speaking with Nelson Ekujimi. He's the executive director of the Committee for the Protection of People's Rights. He's been talking to me about the country's public debt, and hopefully we can have him reconnected to wrap his thoughts as we wrap the conversation today on Over Politicals. It's been a good conversation so far. Just taking a look at the numbers and and this direction. But the big question on the program today is if you think the Tinubu administration has been borrowing too much, if they've crossed the threshold, and if this is one too many. Again, just recently, the National Assembly approved the request to borrow from the external debt market for this purpose. It's Homo Politicals. This is Enterprise Television. I'd like you to join the comment section and be part of the conversation today. Let's know what you think of the conversation today. Nelson Ekujimi, hopefully, is reconnected now as we continue the conversation and begin to wind down the conversation. I did mention to the country's total public debt as it stands as of June 2025. The total public debt is 152 trillion naira. 152 trillion naira. Well, Nelson did mention something, but in dollar terms, it's close to 100 billion naira. Just a few, I think, dollars shy. $99.6 billion precisely total public debt. So join the conversation in the comment section. Let's know what you think. It's been all more politicals. We need to leave things here right now and wrap the conversation. Many thanks for being a part of the conversation today. And until next time, we'll look at another pressing matter, a very interesting conversation. And of course, you know that the conversation on Nigeria's rising debt profile is far from over, and the stakes continue or couldn't be higher as the Tinubu administration continues to do what they can to continue to fund the budget. Well, they have leaned on borrowing to fund critical budget. The question, though, remains, is the country investing in the nation's future, or are we mortgaging the future? I'd like to say a big thank you again to Nelson Ekujimi for his thoughts on the policies and the realities behind these decisions. And to you watching, thank you so much. Your voice matters. Remember, join the conversation and let's talk some more about this. Big question. Is the Tinubu administration borrowing too much? Nigeria's economic direction affects your household, affects my household, affects your business and their generations to come. And that's why these conversations are quite vital. Kingsley, that is my name, saying many thanks for watching, and may God continue to bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Bye for now.